To be Catholic is to live in tension. To be in the world, but not of the world. The more we live our faith, the more we should grow to love those around us. At the same time, the more we live our faith out, the more we are opposed to the falsehoods and sins of those very people. While growing in our love for others, we simultaneously grow in ways that put us in conflict with them. And that tension can be difficult to bear. People who've had a conversion experience later in life can probably tell you about the loved ones who grew distant, either gradually or quickly, as they moved away from the sinful things they used to do with those people, or began to challenge the ideas and values they used to hold in common with them. Friends, family, even spouses can be affected. And maybe it's not open hostility, but a tension is there. The temptation is to release it by compromising the truth of the faith, by lessening our zeal for God, or by becoming tyrannical and obnoxious in our attempts to convert the people around us. Don't give in to that temptation. Embrace the tension. St. Peter's attempt to walk on water last week showed us the good that tension can do. Also last week, St. Paul expressed this tension with the claim that he could almost wish to lose Jesus for himself if that would mean the Jews, his people, would accept Jesus. We know that wouldn't work, and it's not what Paul does. So what does Paul do? Does he give up on the Jewish people? Turn his back on Jesus? Compromise the truth? No. As he tells the Roman Gentiles in today's second reading, I glory in my ministry to the Gentiles in order to make my race jealous and thus save some of them. In other words, he takes the tension between his Christian love of the Jewish people and their rejection of Christ, and he channels that tension to saving the Gentiles. And he does this for two reasons. First is that Paul trusts God. God called him to be apostle to the Gentiles. And if he really believes that Jesus is necessary for salvation, and he does, then he needs to trust Jesus. He needs to trust that while he does what the Lord asks of him in going to the Gentiles, Jesus will provide a way for the Jewish people through someone and something else. The second reason is that Paul knows human nature. Jealousy is a powerful motivator, kind of like a parent giving food to an older child first in order to make the younger child say, I want some. Paul is quite literally saying, I want to make so many Gentiles into Christians that the Jews see it and go, I want to be Christian too. He knows that the Christian life brings joy, and if his arguments and his heritage cannot persuade his own Jewish people, then maybe the experience of seeing that joy in the Gentiles will do the trick. We can learn from this. We might not be dealing with a Jewish-Gentile divide, but we are often faced with the difference between strangers and loved ones. Have you ever tried giving driving advice to your spouse? How many of us have found it easier to pray and talk with a stranger about Jesus than with a sibling? Even Jesus couldn't evangelize his hometown and his family. There are exceptions, but it's generally very hard to directly evangelize and convert those closest to us. But we love them the most. They're the ones we most want to share our faith. So what do? What St. Paul did. The primary thing is to follow Jesus. We each have a unique vocation, a part in his plan to proclaim salvation to the world. And the way to save souls, including the people we love the most, is not to follow our plan, but to cooperate in his. trusting that he'll take care of the ones who aren't in our path, whom we can't help, even if they happen to be close to us. Many a priest and religious sister can tell you stories of how their family began to convert after they said yes to their vocation. And most of us did not evangelize them directly. We just followed Jesus, prayed for them, and saw our loved ones come to conversion almost on their own. We didn't hide our faith or avoid conversation. We just didn't nag them. And I've got a list of family members where this has happened. The second thing is to channel that tension where it's needed, where it can be used. Maybe you can't convert your wife or your best friend directly. So channel that zeal into any other opportunity you get. If your brother won't listen to you about the church, someone else will. Seize those moments with coworkers, acquaintances, chance encounters with strangers. They are someone's sibling or child or spouse. And this not only allows you to help that soul, it helps you to expand your practice of Christian love beyond merely natural associations. And then it sometimes happens that winning converts among strangers inspires your own family and friends to turn to you and say, "You know what? I want it too. Tell me what you tell them." This, by the way, is very similar to what Jesus is doing in the gospel from a different angle. Jesus is not racist. Don't let anyone tell you that this woman converts Jesus from racism. By rejecting the Canaanite woman at first and emphasizing the Jews, he's setting up a lesson. He's using jealousy to increase her desire and her faith, just like giving a toy to one child makes the other want it too. Jesus really means it that God called the Jews first. He did. But God called the Jews in order to make the Gentiles jealous. This exchange between Jesus and the Canaanite woman is a microcosm of the whole plan. Jesus doesn't want to reject pagans and get rid of them. He wants them to do like this woman, to respond with humility and even greater desire, so that when they do receive faith, they'll really embrace it. And St. Paul's experience with the Jews is the reverse of that. God called the Jews to be a sign to the nations, and then God converted the Gentile nations in order to humble and convict the Jews. Because the reality is that everyone, Jew and Gentile, has been disobedient, trapped in sin. So God turns that sin on itself to inspire conversion in each of us. And our part in that plan is to make the best use of our own faith. All of us need ongoing conversion, both for our own good and in order to inspire that desire and conversion in others. If our faith is sincere, we should want those closest to us to embrace Jesus Christ more fully. And if we feel powerless to evangelize those we love the most, that's good, because it teaches us that we aren't saving people by our natural loves. We aren't saving anyone. Jesus is, and he's doing it by divine love and grace beyond mere affections and human loyalties. So embrace the tension. Resist the temptation to let that tension go by compromising your faith or by pushing too hard on those you love. Channel it inward to convert yourself more and more. Channel it towards every opportunity to evangelize those who will listen with an open ear, so that they can become your brothers and sisters in Christ. Above all, trust Jesus. Have faith like this Canaanite woman. Jesus' plan might feel cruel. His timing might seem slow to us. But just as this woman and the disciples saw, Jesus does care. if we cling to faith, if we humbly persevere in the tension, and if we throw ourselves upon his mercy with abandon, not just for ourselves, but for the ones we love, he will save us, and them too.